Today we have Liz Scott presenting Automating Accounts Payable for Best Practices in Efficiency. My name is Emily Hedrick and I will be your Insightful Accountant webinar host. After the session today, everyone will receive a copy of the presentation and the webinar recording. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them in the Q&A box. We'll try to address them during the webinar, and if not, they'll be compiled and given to Liz for follow-up. Today's speaker is Liz Scott. Her instructor bio includes Accounting Lifeline CEO, co-host of QuickBooks Happy Hour, member of the Intuit Trainer Writer Network, advanced certified QuickBooks advisor, and international speaker and trainer. Thank you, Liz, for being here with us today. And when you're ready, you can get started.
Thank you for that intro. And welcome everybody. I was looking at chat and there's some faces in here that I know, so welcome, and I'm happy everyone's with us. Do you want me to start sharing, Emily?
Yes, ma'am, you can whenever you're ready.
Okay, perfect. All right, so today we're going to be talking about automating accounts payable best practices for efficiency. And as Emily just shared, my name is Liz Scott, and I'm happy to be joining you today. I'm, like most of you here, an accounting practitioner, and I have a firm in Oklahoma, and we really focus on clients that have QuickBooks needs. And so one of the things that I really enjoy doing is going in and cleaning up the processes that a lot of these businesses have in place, and that's going to allow for some integrations. And so it's fun to be able to connect apps, but you've got to make sure that you're doing it in a proper workflow. And for those of you who I've met while I'm touring on the road, it's so nice to be able to be in another environment with you. So welcome. And then I want to say thank you to our sponsor today, Tipalti. They are an end-to-end accounts payable software to automate the entire supplier payment operation, making global mass B2B payments frictionless and efficient. So today's agenda is to look at the accounts payable process. And so the entire workflow, and find areas for improvement. And then we get to do the fun thing, which is add automation. So the place that we're going to get started is looking at the three major components of the AP lifecycle. And this is what we're going to call it, is the AP lifecycle. And we're going to start with the purchase orders and then move over into the received payments. And then lastly, look at the payments being issued. And so, Emily, before I move any further, I just want to make sure, does everybody see my screen? We look good?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, so when you look at the task, you must consider two things, the people and the task. And both of these elements must be in alignment in order to eliminate some confusion. So both the task is confusing and the people performing the task, if they're confused, there's going to lead to human error and delay. And unfortunately, if there is a lack of processes, it's harder to prevent and detect fraud. So a big problem is a lack of AP processes, which creates inefficiency. Looking at the three components, we must consider how best to create efficiency. And this starts by understanding the entire process. The big problem is a lack of AP processes. And if we acknowledge these two components, the people and the task, we can start to create some clarity by first mapping the process, and then next adding steps to the process. And lastly, we get to train the people to perform the tasks within this process that we've created. And having clear separation of duties ensures accountability and responsibility for accuracy and integrity of each duty, including the purchasing and the receiving, and then finally moving over into the billing tasks. And so one thing we know is favoritism can happen. And so employees can sometimes like one particular vendor over another, and this can mean that the company might not be getting the best deal. And so even accidental fraud can happen, and it's good to have some nice separation of duties. So Emily, I'm going to say at this time, can we go ahead and start our first poll?
Of course. Here we go. Question 1 is, why are you attending today's webinar? All right, we have responses coming in. A couple more seconds. All right. So we have 23% of today's participants are interested in learning about AP automation for themselves or their business. 77% say I'm interested in learning about AP automation for my clients. And then I'm not sure or other, we had 0%. So that's good.
Everybody knows why they're here. Great. Fantastic. So that's a really great place to start. So it looks like the majority of you are here and interested in learning more about the AP lifecycle. And so we're going to start by the journey of the purchase order. And so to create some clarity, let's begin by defining and reviewing the purchase order process. And each phase has a natural progression. And we must define and then improve upon it with documented processes to introduce the automation that we all so much enjoy. So breaking down the purchase order tasks, we can start to create job duties. And the first place that we're going to begin is the need has to be identified. And this can be goods or it can be services which need to be acquired for the operation. And then next we can have bids that are submitted. And in some scenarios, bids are required by a corporation in order to even move to the next phase. So sometimes you have to have at least 3 to 5 bids in order to move into an acceptance of a bid. And this, what the purpose of it is to eliminate the favoritism that we were talking about, and then also price gouging. If you only have one bid that's submitted, you're not able to compare it against the market trends. So being able to have some bids submitted then leads to being able to accept these bids. And in some businesses, this requires a committee or board approval. And then next you can move over into the contract agreement. And here in large corporations, this can be a very tedious and laborious task with multiple steps. But the idea is to create really good, strong controls. And then next you can move over to the terms and conditions that are accepted. And finally, you get to submit the order. The next phase is the receivable life cycle. And this is where you get to receive the goods or services. And this phase can involve multiple departments or even days between communicating back to the payables office. These are important facts to consider if there's poor communication in the process. To make sure the receiving department is communicating with the payables department for when the payment is eventually issued. So now that we've got the people and the task consideration, we can start to create some clarity. And so we can focus on the job descriptions for a minute. So looking at creating these job descriptions for each task helps you to manage the time that's going to be spent. And it's okay, and it's actually easiest if you do one of my favorite high-tech tools here and you use sticky notes. So in this approach, one of the things that I do is I can ask my clients to get out their sticky notes and I say, what are the tasks that you're performing? And then each of these people can then put them down on some sticky notes, usually about 6 to 10 job functions, and then we can put them in order. And you can get fancy with this and you can move it over to something that is like Smart Draw. But the goal here is to start to find the holes and the bottlenecks, which causes that delay. And one of the things that you find is if you've got a corporation that has some strict policies in place, you might find during this exercise that you might have a lack of compliance. And so documenting all of these steps helps you to make sure that you're using your existing resources the best way possible. So documentation is not only possible, but I would suggest that it's really a must. Capturing documents at each phase and having a process for collection and storing can help to prevent confusion and fraud. The documents that I'm talking about here are the PO and receiving documents. Storing documents within your accounting and/or your AP system creates some transparency. And often when an approver is authorizing, they request documents of goods and services in question. And if the documents are already captured and stored within the prescribed system, time delays and needs for bottlenecks are reduced. These should be captured to confirm goods or services are in possession and items are still on back order or documented. So good, clear documentation allows people to perform their responsible tasks and also adjust the POs as necessary before a payment is issued, maybe for overpayment. So looking at the job duties, we can examine all of the different job tasks in order to be able to say what job duties are we going to assign. Because remember, each of these could actually represent a sticky note. And so who is going to be assigned this particular job function? So the place that we're going to begin is receiving the goods or services. And this can be various methods. You can have the goods that come off of the truck, or you can have a person coming out to perform the services, and then document items that are on back order and accept items into inventory if that's the business practice, if that's applicable, and then communicating these back orders so the PO can be updated. Because often the person who is receiving these goods is not the person who's going to be paying for them. And this can be true even in a scenario where we have these outsourced accountants. You know, we don't always know which items have been received. So having good, clear documentation helps us to be able to know which payments need to actually be authorized and sent out. You also have GRN, and so this is goods received notes. And this is just the record of the receipt of stock. And this record is used to confirm all goods have been received, and often this is compared to the purchase order before a payment can be issued. And then finally, we get to create our bill. So looking at the accounts payable life cycle, this is where it all comes together, these three parts. And if there's errors in the prior two phases, it will affect the accuracy of the payment being issued. And so this last phase of the accounts payable process, issuing payments, is the phase that heavily relies on the prior two phases, the purchase order and the received goods, to be correct. And so it's imperative to have good communication between your departments here. So now that the people and the task have our full attention, we can see why it's paramount for all departments to have written defined workflow orders. Again, the people and the task must be in alignment. The bill process alone can be complicated with several critical steps. If there are clear processes in place, this is where making use of automation can make the biggest impact in the accounts payable process. And this is what a lot of clients get really excited about. They're like, oh, now we get to start introducing some automation. And I do a lot of process evaluations, and I hear my clients say, I want to remove the bottlenecks. But the first phase is to understand where they're occurring. And by creating some efficient workflows, streamlined systems can be incorporated. And this is where a lot of confusion can be eliminated by ensuring collaboration between the different departments to increase productivity. And by documenting the workflow, cross-training can be put into place. And this is a key benefit to cross-training, is that you can reduce or eliminate some of the bottlenecks. And one of the things that can happen here is you have employees that might go on vacation. And so we actually want to encourage people to leave their desk from time to time and to get away. And if we're heavily reliant on one particular person, then it's not going to allow them that flexibility to go and for the business to proceed like normal. But if we have really good documented processes, then we can allow those people to leave those job posts and business as usual is going to continue. And we could also have, illnesses or people leaving the job post altogether. And so we want to make sure that there's good cross-training that's happening. And, that now is a really good example of, if you've got really good, nice documented processes, you can pass that duty off to somebody else who's maybe ready for that remote work station. And then also you can make sure that if there's more than just one person who's aware of all of the tasks on hand for this piece of the workflow, then you've got an additional set of eyes reviewing those tasks. And here's an example of where automation can be incorporated. And you can see here that the purchase order and the received goods happen first. So we've got the purchase order and then the receipt that's happening. And then next it's followed by the last two steps, which are going to be the bill and then also the payment. And this can be really complicated. There can be lots of steps, as we're going through to point out that if you don't have good communication, well, then these payments over here, these last two steps, are going to have errors. And utilizing technology in the system can allow for less time to be spent on some of these manual tasks. And so clarity of job duties and notifications of automations can inform users of status. So for example, if you have a purchase order and a received good can take place within your accounting system or inventory platform, which is then synced to an AP solution, this allows for the automatic notification of status and the authorization of payments to occur. And so the ERP, your accounting solution, is sometimes where the vendor details are input, and then the payable solution is where your bill and your bill payments are entered. And so having this nice bi-directional sync here is really important if you've got existing vendors who are already inside of your accounting system, and then you pull in a new AP solution. You can see that there's bi-directional sync happening here. And then you can also have these new vendors, they can do some self-onboarding. So it's nice to be able to see the whole process and where we're going to be able to introduce some automation. Emily, do you want to go ahead and launch our next poll?
Sure. Let me get poll question 2 up. What size clients are you working with? Everybody get their votes in. Give it a few more seconds. Okay. So we have 60% have under 10 employees, 20% have 10 to 50 employees, 15% have 51 to 499 employees, 5% have 500 to 999, and 0% have 1,000 and over.
That's great. So that gives us, kind of an idea of who's joined us today. So a lot of you that have the under 10, this is going to be really nice to introduce some automation just so that you can handle more volume. And then that 10 to 50 and that 50 to 500, that's where the rest of you pretty much lied. And so being able to have a system to be able to handle the accounts payable will just help to reduce the amount of time spent on these tasks and have some clarity of what's happening. So looking at the payable job duties, we're determining the job tasks that can be assigned. And so we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at what's going to happen in this payable life cycle. And if we look here, there's lots of different ways that the bill creation process is going to be entered. So we've got the first thing that we do is we're going to look at the item coding. And the items must be consistent to create really good cost reports. And then next we need to also have job and project coding, which must be captured and be consistent across all of our jobs. and then bill and PO matching. And so if this is not something you're familiar with, we're going to talk about this a little more, but matching is the process performed for goods and services ordered through a purchase order. And it takes place during the invoice approval process. And then these bills or invoices can be matched to the purchase order, creating a two-way match. And then if you take it to the next level, you can actually have a three-way match by saying that you're going to match against also the receiving information. And then there's also the terms. And so making sure that you're capturing these is going to actually help you go into the next phase, which is the cash flow management. And that's why I've included it here in our accounts payable lifecycle, is cash flow management is really a hot topic for us accountants. And this is where we can start to advise our clients how to structure these payments and in which method will work best for them to help them be able to manage their funds. And then lastly, we have the bill approval. And in this step, this helps us to eliminate accidental payments and then again have separation of duties, so we have some fraud prevention in there. And so we're going to take a closer look at the bill coding. And so when it comes to bill coding, there are several factors here, such as within the PO and received order documents. Do they match the bill coding? Items in your accounting and inventory and AP solution must be consistent. And so consistent tracking is how meaningful reports can be generated. And so one of the questions that we often ask, are you using account numbers? Are you using item list and class and location list or groups or any type of categories? And then do you have jobs and project list, which can be viewed by all team members? So it's really important to be able to have this nice transparency, so that way the bill can be created and you've got some nice consistent reports for your jobs. And then we get to start looking at some automation. And so by understanding all of the job functions and the steps to automation can be added. And one example is the bill creation. So bills can be uploaded through portals or emailed to an AP solution. And Tipalti has the OCR abilities. And so what their OCR abilities do is they can recognize and make some recommendations, but you still have editing power. So you can go in and you can look at being able to say, are there splits? Do you have sub-customers? And so you can even have an additional service that can be added on here, which is their managing service. And that can be an added piece that you can help to verify the data entry is correct. So we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at matching. And so when we're talking about matching, here we've got the 2- and the 3-way matching that's possible. So PO 2-way and 3-way matching can be automated, and this is based off of your headers and your line levels. And so automatic PO coding populates the PO details on the invoice. And so right here you can see an example. The top line had perfect line matching. And so we were able to go ahead and say, yes, our bill line matches our purchase order line. But then if we look at this next line, we can see there's errors here. And so this might be where we've got a difference in quantity. So quantity items here, 25 quantity items here. And then there's also a difference of amount. And so this is really nice to be able to have good consistency. And then this last one, it tells us that we have a difference in price and we have a difference in dollar amount. So because there was a price difference, we have a total amount that's going to be different. So once we have our matching, then we can come over and we can start creating some bills. And you can see the bill generation can be a very laborious task. And having clear processes within all departments means that time spent on each phase can be reduced. And so we're going to take a look at the automatic bill generation. So a few ways that bills can be automated is by allowing that OCR ability to help us. And so we can scan in or we can email in our invoices, And then we can look at our statements, and we can see that there's a copy of it here. And we've got the pending review. And so we're able to see that we can also add in custom fields if necessary. And then we can make sure that we've then route it to the next person in line. So if we've got a supplier or approver that needs to be the next person to review this bill, that can help us with generating some automation. So when we're thinking about terms when creating bills, this is an area that we definitely want to pay attention to, because this is going to help us in our cash flow management. So most businesses fail, which we know is partially due to a lack of cash flow. And so by taking the time to capture terms on the bill, staging of payments can reduce cash flow strains. And so this little step can actually be a lifesaver in the survival of a lot of businesses. And right now, I would definitely say that you probably are being asked by some of your clients, which bills do I pay first? And so if you've got a place that you're documenting that, you can actually go to a dashboard and you can see what's the timeline of my bills that are due, and you can go ahead and make some strategic plans and staging of those bills. And that will help with the approval process. So setting in place an approval process is the desired step of a lot of businesses, great and small. And so one of the things that they want to do is they want to eliminate these bottlenecks, and they want to have some flexibility that gets them away from a lot of these manual tasks. So if we come over here and we're looking at some of our automation options, and so we can have notifications that can be sent out via email or phone notifications. And so you can see here there's multiple users that can be added with specific user permissions for distinction between the payees, the reviewers, and the bill generators. And so this means multiple layers of security if that is what your business needs. Again, this is an option. You don't have to have all of these different approvers in place, but if you've got a big corporation, you can see that this is really necessary and useful for a lot of businesses. And because we're using a system that has automation in place, viewers can actually see these notifications by either their laptop or inside of, which would be their mobile browser, or they can see it on side of their mobile devices. And so you've got two different options here. And this also helps whenever you're thinking about vendor onboarding, which we're going to look at too. So bill approvals can take place via the email. And one of the nice things here is that whenever users pull up this email in the AP system, they actually have the ability to view the PDF within this email. And so you're going to have some approvers that they just want to know what the next step is. And so this is an example of what that email would look like that would go out to, if you're the accountant paying bills on behalf of your client, or if you're teaching your clients how to use this system internally, what would happen is this email would go out and the approver could say, I just approve it, or they could say they want to make some updates, or they would want to say, I need to send it back, and they could put in some notes, or lastly, they can just outright dispute it. But if they wanted to open up the actual PDF to look at it, they can do so without even logging into the full AP to Pulte system. So if you look over here, we have another option where this user has decided to log into the AP solution. And from here, they could look at things like the GL coding, as well as other bill details. And so if they wanted to make any changes, they could come down here and they could see maybe they wanted to make sure that the department was tagged, or they needed to make some editing notes. So you can see we've got a pencil here that they could make some changes. And then on this screen, I really like it because it tells you that you have this bill approval process set in place. And so here we've got maybe just the department head is the one who signs bills that are under $5,000. But maybe now we need to have a controller who steps in to say, well, if the bill is around $50,000, then from $5,000 to $50,000, we need to have this second approver. And then if it's more than that, then we need to have a third line of defense to make sure that we've got the funds in place to maybe spend that much money, or we've got something going on that we just want to make sure that we've got everybody on deck for a large payment that's going to be issued. So capturing the vendor details should be easy, but there are so many steps here that errors can be created. And I'm often asked, where can manual tasks be eliminated and automation be introduced? And one answer is inputting vendor details. Your vendors know their details best. And so I'm a big fan of allowing vendors to enter in these details themselves, and this is going to eliminate some of your internal staff waste. So by examining the vendor management job task, we can start to create job duties which can include this automation. And so if we look at the steps involved in the vendor information management, we can see we've got entering of the vendor contact information, we've got name matching to the legal entity, we've got W-9 confirmation, and then we've got 10 matching. And so this is all built inside of the solution, which is a huge win for us because this is a biggie whenever we get to the year end. We don't have to do 10 matching at the year end. We're able to say we captured the correct vendor information. The name actually matches their legal entity. The W-9 has been entered, so we've got those documents captured and stored. And then 10 matching has already happened at the time that the vendor is created. And then at that same time, we know that the address verification is important for 1099s. And so this can all take place and your new vendor can actually enter these details themselves. And then lastly, the thing that they can do is they can say, what are their preferences for payments? So they can enter in those details and then that banking information can then be verified. So a lot of these back and forth emails that happen that take time can be eliminated. And we also know that emailing back and forth sensitive information is not secure. And so this eliminates emailing of sensitive data. So vendor information management is definitely challenging. And so that's where those errors of misspellings or incomplete names can occur. And this is another reason that I really am a fan of allowing your vendors to self-onboard. And so a new vendor email would come from a vendor's accounts payable at the business name email address down here. You can see it, which has some white label branding options. If you decide to go that route, you can actually have these emails sent. And so the email looks like this right here. So it says, goes out to your vendor and it lets them go ahead and put in their tax ID number. And then each of these steps, it lets them go ahead and walk through. So that way they are then going over to the next phase, which would be the W-9 confirmation. And you can see that you've got options here. You can do it on a mobile device or you can do it from your web browser. So during the self-onboarding, supplier registers through the online portal and they can come over here and they can say, what is it that is the payment method that they prefer, their currency, thresholds, and if at any time they need to make changes, this portal is actually open 24/7. So they could come over here and they could make changes to their bank account if necessary. And the other thing they can do is they can actually see payment history, which is really nice because this eliminates some of the back and forth emails. And so if you had a question from your vendor that said, when will I be paid? You could direct them over here to their portal. And once they learn that this is their go-to resource, they're going to stop emailing the internal staff and they're going to be able to answer these questions on their own. So within the portal, both banking and vendor details can be validated. So they'll come over here, they'll enter their details, and then again, those details are going to be validated. Emily, I'm going to go ahead and say it's time for our third poll. Will you go ahead and launch that for us?
Yes, let me get that pulled up. And question number 3 is, what accounting ERP do you and or your clients currently use? Couple more seconds for voting. Okay. So for this poll, we have 0% using NetSuite, 95% using QuickBooks, 5% using the Intact, and 0 using Microsoft Dynamics.
Well, that's funny, Emily. So I guess I have my QuickBooks buds on the line.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so same boat. I definitely, utilize QuickBooks and all of the apps that are surrounding it. So big shout out there for that. Okay, so payment methods. And so if we're looking at all the different ways that payments can be taken, this definitely adds a layer of confusion. And so not only do you want the vendors to have a choice of what kind of payment they want to accept, but also this is where the business owner can say, these are the type of payments that we're willing to authorize and issue. So here again, we have some controls. And if we start looking at where this all begins, we have, oh gosh, so we have a few methods that I've grouped together during and then you've got the T&E cards, which are most often used for travel. And sometimes these cards are stored within the accounting department and only issued prior to travel. And then the 1 cards are a combination of both the P cards and the T&E cards. And these cards are often held by the individual employee or contractor indefinitely for the individual purchasing options. So if you're using P cards or T&E cards or 1 cards, this makes, for a normal business operation, but it definitely adds to a complication in the AP process. And unfortunately, this is sometimes where we see duplications of payments being issued because there's a lack of visibility. So by recording the bill or purchase within this system, the OCR abilities will actually alert you if there's a duplicate payment. So there's an option here to be able to say, don't pay this vendor twice. There's been a payment already authorized. And then there's our lead checks. To say, and at some point we will no longer issue checks, but in the meantime, we have to do our best to reduce fraud and the time spent on these checks. And so some of the things that I have seen before are check stamps or stamping machines, or even pre-signed checks that are sitting inside the office that are blank checks that the different individual employees can come through the desk. And I've seen it even in the mornings where there's several checks on the desk and the different employees or contractors come by, they get their check and they put it in their wallet and off they go to go buy the job's supplies for the day, which is very alarming. And this is not a good way to operate business, because what happens is the office staff doesn't know how much the total check for the purchases are. And they also are often not able to see the details until they clear the bank. So whenever we're trying to eliminate bottlenecks, one of the things that I hear is that these manual tasks have been eliminated by these very, I would just say, clever ways for them to have these checks in place, so that way they can avoid some of the restrictions that we definitely know need to be in place in order to prevent fraud and also confusion. So one of the things that I see picking up in popularity is ACH payments. And I think this is going to be the big trend that everybody leads to. And so the reason is this definitely reduces the risk of fraud. It's way easier to track, and your people actually get their money faster than a paper check. So in this scenario, this is becoming our new norm. And whenever we look at the wire transfers, these are still being used, but I definitely see this as a more costly option that will decline as more businesses switch over to those preferred ACH payments. And then lastly, we have this option for these e-checks. And so e-checks are definitely growing in popularity, and we've got the net now and the positive pay, which reduces some fraud as well. And if we look closer at our payment options, here we can see the currency is visible and the payment options. So if we're logging into the Tipalti system, we can see right here, here's an example of the payment currency that our customer has chosen. And then, so we can see that they've chosen Indian rupees. And then over here, we've got then the business has said, I want to authorize these types of payments. And then our vendor can come over here and they can choose which payment method they want to use. And so you can see we have a lot of different options for each of our vendors to be able to choose from. And something that's definitely growing in popularity is the global businesses need global payment options. And so this is not just large businesses, but smaller businesses need a global option too for overseas suppliers. So if we're thinking about these global payments, then we're able to look at the Tipalti offers 190 countries and 120 different currencies. So I looked at this list of all of these different types of currencies, and I have to admit some of them were some I was not familiar with at all. And it's because we've got all of these different countries with various ways that they accept currency. But if we're using an automated solution, an AP solution, then we're able to make our customers happy. And these vendors can choose the currency that works best for them. And the thing that we love as accountants is that we can actually reconcile these currencies. And so we're going to take a closer look at all of the batches and the ways that we can reconcile these payments. So within the batch payment groups, multiple vendors can also be paid with multiple currencies to create a batch payment. And so this means the vendor payments are approved and the payer does not need to spend time manually converting currency to the vendor's preference. Instead, we're using an automated solution to be able to allow for these payments to be converted into the currency that has been approved for that batch. And if we look here, we've got a global complication that sometimes occurs. So we've got M&A business structures that are quickly becoming a norm. And so we've got businesses that have acquired different individual businesses. We've got international divisions. We've got subsidiaries, brands, or entities that can create this AP process that's going to be hard to manage. And if we look at an example of one of those, we can see here that we've got a lot of confusion. So we've got different entities in different locations. We can see they've got different countries even brought in. And so being able to issue the different payments and then have nice reporting, and even in the reconciliation, this can be a difficult process to manage. And if we look at the manual steps that would be involved in this multi-subsidiary example, we can see we've got all of our different countries that are involved here, all of the different ways that they've got to issue these payments. And so this might involve an entire day of somebody going through and saying, well, now we're working on the UK subsidiary and we need to issue UK payments through the UK banks to this particular vendor. And then lastly, we need to go over and enter that over into our accounting solution. And so instead of having this very tedious, laborious task, we can see over here, we can have all of those same subsidiaries, all of those same countries involved, and then we can have our AP solution sitting in the middle, and it's going to do the currency conversion for us. And then it's going to push all of that payment details and vendor details over into our accounting solutions. And so we can see here that what's highlighted is we've got all of these different payee entities. So this is just an example of being able to show you it doesn't really matter if you've got businesses that have multiple entities. You can use this solution to be able to process those payments and still store all of those details. So if we look over at our payment approval process, this is another place where we can introduce some automation. And so aside from the bill creation approvals, you can also have payment approvals. And this is really nice for being able to manage our cash flow. And we know that the more details that we have, the better reporting that we're going to have. And so we've got some nice reports that we can create for the business operations that we're going to look at. And so cash flow transparency is definitely critical for being able to have some nice ability to manage when the paid dates are due and how those monies are going to be spent. And so if we think about our reconciliation reports, a really nice report that we often want is this ability to look inside of each of these batches. And so if we ever had any question, we can actually come over inside of our reports detail, go into our payments, and we can download this document of the batch via a CSV or a PDF, so that way we could look at all of these details, store all of these reports if necessary, to be able to refer back to for reconciling. And whenever we're thinking about capturing the internal controls piece, we're thinking about both the people and the tasks here in these reportings. And so reports can give us a lot of feedback about our staff and our vendor issues. And so reports can help us to identify and evaluate if a staff member is consistently submitting late payments, or if a vendor is routinely issuing incomplete POs. So being able to get good detail helps us to be able to know if we've got some issues. Another thing that we have is that Tipalti's got this detect risk reporting. And what this does is it lets us know if we've got some vendors that maybe are high risk, or if there's any type of suspicious activity, we actually are going to get an alert, and it's going to send some triggers to us. So this is just another report that's available. So overall, the stages of the payable evolution, you can see that there's lots of people and tasks that are involved in the avoidance of fraud. And so if we come over here and we look at the impact, we've got the supplier relationship and these payments, and then we've got the risk mitigation. So this is where we think about our fraud and our PO matching, and we want to make sure that we're not issuing payments on more than what we've received on our POs. And anytime that we have a nice solution for being able to automate, we're going to actually be able to grow or spend less time on our AP duties. So the entire AP lifecycle has a staggering number of steps with variances and opportunities for lots of risks. So each of these inaccuracies can have an effect on the AP process to slow it down and create some confusion. So by stating with sticky notes, my favorite high-tech tool, what the system has in store, then we're able to create some formal methods, being able to look at what are the different AP processes within the life cycle. So other considerations is the synergy between our AP solution and our accounting solution. And so this is definitely very vital for us to have some clarity. So if we think about, we want to make sure that our accounting system and our payable solution are having this nice syncing back and forth, we're able to look to see, here's some samples. We've got our ERP, so our accounting software. We've got our vendors that are stored inside of those solutions, our bills and our bill payments. And we can have vendors syncing bidirectionally, because sometimes they get entered, or if we start the solution, then we've already got those vendors that can then be synced over into our solution. And then where we're going to actually enter the bills or invoices, whichever one you call them. So where you enter those bills is actually going to take place in Tipalti, and then that data is going to be synced over into QuickBooks, so you'll see that open bill. And then lastly, once there's a payment that's issued, that detail is also going to be synced over into your accounting solution. And so if we look over here, we can see that our accounting solution should integrate with our AP solution to reduce some confusion and create this clarity that we're all looking for. And so some examples of some pre-mapped integrations that already exist are all of my peeps out there that are QuickBooks users, and then NetSuite, and then also Sage. So there's some pre-mapping that's already available to us. And here's an example of an accounting solution and an AP solution integration. And so this is just a really nice example of the workflow. So again, we have the vendors that can be synced either direction, and then we're going to actually have the bills collected. We're going to allow that OCR ability to be able to read those bills, help us with the coding and reviewing, and then approve the bills because we've got some nice automation, submit the payment, again, if we need an approver that can take place. And then once that payment is issued, we can then go ahead and sync all of those details over to QuickBooks. So the bills and the payment details are going to be synced over into our QuickBooks solution. So the AP process definitely has some complication involved in it. And the more that we are clear about all of the duties and the tasks with the people involved, then we're able to reduce these bottlenecks and we can have some good systems in place. And so often when you reevaluate the departments, the processes needed to be changed are identified. And so once you have captured the tasks and the automated solution can be added to create this synergy and reduce these bottlenecks. So I'm definitely a fan of looking at the existing processes, making sure that they're clear and everybody is in alignment, and then pulling in our AP solution to be able to help us with some automation. And I'm going to say at this point, we have some people here to help us with some questions. I see there's some questions coming in through our chat, which is great. It looks like we have a lot of answers to those. But I'm going to go ahead and say, Erica, are you here to help us with some of our questions that we have from our attendees?
I am.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm just finishing up one question in the chat.
That's great. It looks like we've got some really good back and forth communication. Lots of good questions.
So I'll read these out as I answer them. So one question is the bill synced both ways? So I'll just verbally give my answer. The bill is synced one way, and that would be into the accounting system. The next question is, all of our largest clients are looking for this solution, our desktop. Okay, so the original question was around, does Tipalti integrate with QuickBooks Desktop? And my answer was, there's no integration with QuickBooks Desktop. It would require a file download, upload type of process. The next question is, how does the firm bundle pricing work? Okay, also, can we run reports by due date? Yes, you can run reports by due dates. We have a couple of other questions here too. So what does the process look like if a partner's address or payment details change? Because we provide a self-service portal, partners can easily change their address and payment details on their own at any time. Additionally, depending on the payment method they choose, we cross-reference information. So if what has been entered in the partner/supplier portal does not match with what the bank has on file, or an account number, as an example, the partner will receive an email notifying them to make the change in the portal to ensure their payment can be processed. I get this question quite a bit. How does Tipalti help reduce fraud risk? And the answer is there's several mechanisms to help mitigate fraud risk. We have enterprise-grade security and two-factor authentication for payers and also payees. We segregate roles by using permissions to drive who can access what information within Tipalti. We comply with all OFAC and AML regulations to make sure you do not pay people that the government has on a watch list. On top of all of that, we have a risk management module that lets you flag and prevent future attempts of fraudsters from being paid. And then companies often participate in our risk management network, which can help prevent fraud across our entire customer base. Next question is, can you send cross-border payments? Absolutely. Tipulti is a licensed money transmitter, and we support 190 countries and 120 currencies, also providing 6 different payment methods. Well, here's a good one. I normally pass fees on to my partners. Can that be done in Tipulti? Absolutely. You can configure what fees you pass on to your partners, payees, via Tipulti. You can incentivize them to choose the payment method you prefer by selecting, subsiding the cost of a payment method. And then that way you can make the transition cost neutral. Some customers even mark up the transaction fee and pass that on to the payee. You have options that you can configure. Looks like I have one more question. I think we have enough time for it. I have international partners to pay, and we struggle to collect tax information. How are W-8 forms handled? Good question. Many companies struggle with W-8 form collection. There's regulation that makes this problem even more difficult as documentation required from partners become more extensive. So Tipulti makes W-8s a self-service process for payees within that onboarding portal. There's a wizard that is available in multiple languages that guides payees through the right tax form to fill out to begin with. And then from there, we have a greatly simplified form that validates and guides payees through the tax form. And this essentially is greatly reducing the amount of time typical companies have that they're spending troubleshooting and training their partners on how to fill out tax forms. Let me check the chat one more time and see if there's any more that have been posted. Yes, 2 more. Does your brand of AP and accounting system marketed in Malaysia? We do support customers in Malaysia. So whether that be the business is located in Malaysia, so headquartered in Malaysia, or maybe there's an entity in Malaysia. We also support making payments into Malaysia. Without knowing any details beyond that, we do support Malaysia. Last question, where does your app get bank balances for cash flow management? Bank balances for cash flow management. So there is no cash flow management portion to this platform. You will have reconciliation visibility, so you will see exactly the amount of money from your chosen bank account to remit these payments. And also you'll see those individual payments made.
You know, I would just go ahead and tack on to that, that one of the things that I was referring to was being able to look at those payment due dates and being able to say, this is how much is due, this is the due dates. And so, you know, as the accountants, we can help to say, you know, we advise you to schedule the payments in this particular order.
For sure. Great point. And that does help with cash management, for sure. Right. Not seeing any other questions.
Well, so it looks like you did a great job of working through all of those questions. And so I want to say thank you, because you've been busy in the chat as well.
So it's a good day.
thank you for everybody who's joined us. And I'm going to go ahead and move over into our last slide and just say thank you for joining us today. And you're welcome to reach out and email if you've got questions, especially if you're saying, hey, I'd like some process help and how do I structure getting ready? And then also being able to field all those additional questions straight over to Palti to say, what are the next steps? What do I do in order to look at a demo or being able to ask additional questions? Because we've had a lot here. And if you're like me, you're going to say, oh, wait, I've got more questions later. So you can definitely reach out to some support and help later. So thank you, Erica, for being here. And thank you, Emily, for being the wonderful help to be able to get the platform going and making sure that we're all here and ready for the webinar. So thank you today.
Thank you so much, Liz. And thank you, Erica, for answering all the questions. Here shortly, I'll get everybody the webinar recording and the presentation from today. So be looking out for that email probably in the next hour. I hope to see you all at the next Insightful Accountant webinar. We have quite a few this week and next week. Well, just in the next couple of weeks, actually, with everybody being home, everybody wants to do some webinars. So please join us. Hope to see you then. Everybody have a good day. Thank you.